On September 23, 1994, the developer Ruby Party, an all-female team, released the first ever Otome game along with the publisher Koei and NEC Home Electronics, Angelique. At this point, Nintendo is still a relatively new company, releasing their first ever console, the Family Computer, or Famicom, in 1983. In 1998, they released an updated rendition of the console, the Super Famicom, which is what Angelique ran on, the best-selling console of the 16-bit era. This was an impressive feat, as it was the only game marketed explicitly towards women, surrounded by other genres from puzzle to shoot-'em-ups at the time. You see, in the game, players played as the protagonist Angelique Limoges, a 17-year-old girl who has been chosen by the current queen and her aide, Dia, as one of the two candidates from the Royal Small-Lini Girls Academy to become the next queen. Angelique gets transported to Flying City to start her final exam, populating a piece of land. That's hell of an exam. What the hell? What do they teach at that Girls Academy? Whoever finishes populating their land first wins and becomes the next queen. This, of course, is not a feat the candidates have to do alone. Don't worry, they get the help of 9 guardians who will use their powers to make the people of the candidate's land happy and even sometimes help sabotage the land of the other candidate, aka Angelique's rival, Rosalia. As you play the game, you can choose to fall in love with the guardians, but the catch is you will forfeit your chance to become the queen, but will live happily ever after. This was the birth of the Otome genre. Otome in English means maiden. Nowadays, Otome games have evolved in many different ways, from static to animated characters on the screen, or going from PG-13 to explicit, or including more gameplay and leaving the visual novel genre to pursue RPG, stat raising, and more. After Angelique gave birth to the genre, the one game that solidified the genre to become popular in Japan, Tokimeki Memorial Girls Side, came out in 2002 and it expanded the market big time. Some other notable milestones for this market: in 1998, Fantastic Fortune gained a cult following, and in 2008, DS/PSP ports surged, and Ultimate, one of the biggest Otome companies in Japan right now, debuted iconic titles like Hakuouki and Hiro no Karaka. We have access to these Otome games on the PC, Nintendo Switch, I'm not too sure, but they have animes for both. I'd say Otome games have evolved from gameplay-wise to 3 main different types. For example, we started out with the traditional visual novel where you just read and interact with the story via choices, and hopefully those choices lead you to the right path, to your happy end or good end, or even best end. And then there are kinetic novels, which are just essentially almost the same thing as visual novels. The only difference is you do not get to choose, you just read it. Essentially, I would say this is like a book, because there are no branching plot lines, there's no multiple endings or outcomes. You just read it and that's how it ends. These type of games are considered to be very short compared to visual novels. And then there are stat raisers or stat based. Basically, they're a little bit more intensive than the normal visual novel, because not only are you choosing the quote-unquote correct choices, you also have to choose the choices that will build stats on the right character. So if you raise up, for example, charm over intelligence, you're gonna get one character instead of the other, because they favor a more charismatic personality rather than an intelligent one. Sometimes they're not even personality traits, but also skills you have to raise up so you can attract the right love interest that you want to pursue. And usually you raise these stats by doing tasks or choosing a certain choice that isn't necessarily correct or wrong, just it's a choice that favors one character over the other, or one stat over the other. And sometimes these type of games have minimum stat requirements that basically say if you don't raise your dancing skill at level 10 by the end of the main story branch or the main story, you will basically have a bad end and you would have to start the game again just to get that dancing skill raised up. And then lastly, there are life simulator or dating simulator. Basically, they're very similar to stat racing games, just more intense because you are given full control over all aspects of the in-game's avatar life and activities. So you have to take the heroine or the MC to school, to work. You have to choose who they're gonna hang out with, who are they gonna romance. It's very more detailed than a stat racing game. So basically think like The Sims, but with the end game being romancing a love interest instead of, I don't know, becoming rich or killing people. I don't really know how to play Sims, y'all. And there's also fan discs. Fan discs, or FDs for short, are basically a sequel or like a bonus content for people who played the first game and want to know what happens after they get together. It features anything from additional storylines, of course more CG, maybe more new music. Sometimes it includes mini games, basically anything that just expands on what happened in the first game for people who wanted more bonus content. So here's what you will typically see when you boot up an Otome game. So usually starts with a little backstory of the heroine, where she's from, whatever, what's happening, what's going on, what's the plot, and then you will get introduced to another page where you can customize the name, or you can customize the character depending on how much you can customize. Usually it's just the name, but some Ultimate games give you an option to change the visuals and whatnot. After that, there are two different things that could happen depending on the type of Ultimate game you are playing. One, you could choose the route right away, who you want to go or pursue afterwards, or you have to play through the main story, which is just an introduction of all the love interests. You get to know them and you get to know more of the plot, and based on the choices that you pick in the main story, it will lead you to your chosen love interest or whatever your choices led to. There are correct choices and bad choices after you get into the roots of your character that you have been given or you've been chosen, depending on what game you played. The correct choices will lead you to a good or a happy ending, and the incorrect ones will lead you to a bad end. So some games feature a route-based system where players can romance one love interest at a time, while others love interests are regulated to supporting cast members, while other games feature a free-for-all gameplay style where in-game choices are used to determine which character you end up with at the end of the game rather than just the quality of the ending. There's additional features for overall gameplay, such as special events with the characters. Those are called flags, and they basically define whether you are going to get a bad end, a good end, essentially an important decision. Some games have mini games that you can do, and a really big factor for a lot of people in the Otome fandom is the voice acting aspect. So most commercial Ultimate games are fully voiced, usually with well-known voice actors. In other words, we call them seiyus, Japanese voice actors. And if people have a favorite seiyu, they usually go after that character because they want to listen to their favorite seiyu. Some Ultimate games have animated graphics and, of course, CGs. CGs are computer graphics. It's essentially a reward in form of an image. It's usually given to players upon completion or after successfully choosing the right answer. You get a little CG saying, "Yay, this is them together, good job." And then you continue on with the story. Now I'm going to get into the different character types that you can encounter in an Ultimate game. But first, I want to make a clarification that there are conquerable and non-conquerable characters, which means that the conquerable characters are the one that you can go after and romance, while the non-conquerable ones are basically side characters. They're just there to support the story or the heroine in some way. You cannot romance them at all, sadly. Also, some games implement locked routes, which basically means you have to do everybody else's route before you conquer or do this character's route. He is kind of considered sometimes the canon love interest, the love interest that is the poster boy of the Otome game, or just like the end game. So here are the types of characters in Otome games. Of course, we have the MC, the heroine, the player character. There's two different types of Otome MCs that you can get. One is meant to be like a self-insert. They have not really a distinguishable personality or backstory. They're just like a placeholder for people that are Yumes and they want to insert themselves into the game. Usually they have like brown hair, really long bangs that are covering their eyes. Sometimes they're just eyeless. They don't have any eyes. Then there is a non-self-insert type. They have a defined personality. They have a strong backstory. They have a mission. They have a goal. They have a canon name. Usually you see that canon name before you edit it or like backspace it to add in your name. Usually they have it just like listed. For example, for Code Realize, it's Cardia. Most of Otome MCs are not voiced, even if they have a really like well-defined personality. That is just the default, but we have been seeing more Otome games with a voiced MC. But there are some Otome games that have a voiced MC. Sometimes when you leave the default name as well, love interests do pronounce the name. For example, in Bustafellas, they say the name out loud. The voice actors say the name. You change it, they're not going to say the name. Some Otome games have a portrait of the MC in the corner, so you can see the expressions on MC's face throughout the story, and some games give you the option to turn that off if you want to turn that off. Now moving on to the side characters, there are side characters in the game. These are considered unconquerable, meaning you cannot go and romance them. Most of the side characters are like the MC's best friend. Some are family members, some are antagonists, some are, just there to help out move the story. They usually have full sprite, but in the case that they don't, it's very rare, but they sometimes like have no eyes or just don't have any sprites in general. You just see the text on the bottom. So a lot of the Otome games out there are the reverse harem type, and usually they vary the personality for all the love interests. So a really common one is the ore-sama. So ore-sama is like an arrogant type of person. They are very self-important and they refer to themselves as ore. Ore means me. That's why we call these characters ore-sama, because they think they're, sometimes come off as narcissistic or just like superior. They think they are gods. They think that everybody should like kiss their feet. Sometimes they are also very wealthy or very intelligent or just have like this outstanding talent that they have. They can be charming. Even though like they're really arrogant, they can be charming. And sometimes some Otome games explain why they are so arrogant and why they're so like self-important. And usually that is because they have deep-seated insecurities or they have trauma from their childhood or such. In other words, you can call this type of character the alpha male. Then we have the childhood friend. I feel like almost every Otome game out there has the childhood friend. They usually already have a very close and established relationship with the MC that we learn throughout the story. Usually it's in like the early childhood, and they, not all the time, but they always happen to be a little older than the MC. Into the MC, they're usually the big brother type of figure in their life. Think of them as someone that the MC always relies on no matter what. Then we have the kudere. Kudere are cold, they're distant. I do want to say they are mysterious, but they're not always. They just are very self-defensive and are blunt and direct, and they don't have time to mess around. They're very cold towards you. Then there are danderes. Danderes are not like kuderes, even though they are seen to be similar, but the difference is that the dandere is more distant, anti-social, shy, gloomy. They have low self-esteem. It takes a lot of time for them to warm up to the MC. They don't like to open up to people or strangers. Then we have the tsundere. The tsundere, I feel like, is also a really popular character type. The tsun in tsundere means soon, and it just means to turn away in disgust and just showing you the cold shoulder. And then the dere in tsundere, dere means to be lovey-dovey. I don't want to say like they have split personality, but they just like, they lie. They're very cold, almost hostile to the MC at first, but then they warm up a little bit and they're like, okay, fine, whatever, I guess I like you or whatever, it's not a big deal. And I think this type of character type is very popular because they get embarrassed easily, especially when they are admitting their feelings to the MC. So I would say that they have mood swing. And then we have the yandere. Yandere, I feel like, is like the most popular archetype out of all the archetypes that I've listed so far. The yan in yandere means yanderu, which means insane, sick, and then dere means, lovey-dovey, or love sick in this case. Yanderes are a bit controversial for a number of reasons, mainly because they are dangerously obsessive. They want to possess the MC in every aspect. They have a sense of overwhelming love and affection that seems very unhealthy. They're very, very prone to jealousy and will target or kill anybody that is going after towards you or showing affection towards you. Basically, they want to be the only person in your life, and it might lead you to be locked up. Who knows? I don't know. I wouldn't know. Don't ask me. Their personality compared to all the other archetypes are the most prone to be dangerous, just because of the fact that they are most likely are capable of mentally abusing or physically abusing the MC. And just a heads up, usually these characters hide the fact that they are yandere when first playing the game. So once you find out, or once you catch them in the act, they will flip the switch and you will see the real them, which is the yandere in them. Then we have the Genki. The Genki just means healthy, energetic. They're lively, animated. They love to party. They're easy to laugh. They like to joke. They're very, very, very optimistic. They're upbeat and usually are like the class clown out of all of the love interests. Like, this dude is comic relief, essentially. Then we have the Playboy. The Playboy is just, I feel like, is in almost every Otome game. Or not, but like, they're suave, they're handsome, they're a womanizer, they are charismatic, they have fangirls probably. He's just like flirting nonstop with not only the MC, but the other girls around him. However, if you get into his route, they are fairly loyal and devoted, but there's a challenge. There might be people trying to steal him away from you. And that's a battle that you picked if you picked his route. But yeah, usually how the story goes for the Playboy is that he realizes, oh my god, I actually love this girl. I'm actually not just flirting just to flirt. I actually want to flirt to get to know her and to be with her eventually. Now, Megane just means attractive guy in a pair of glasses. That's really what it is. It's not really like a personality type. It's just like a common character trope that they put in Otome games, like, oh, that guy has glasses, okay, he's studious, he's intelligent, he's smart, he might be a little arrogant, or he might be, you know, a kudere or a dande, but it just means they have glasses, and usually, not always, are smart. Then we have the shota. The shota are younger male characters. They usually have childish personalities and are very innocent, very naive. Their routes tend to be more pure. They are usually always younger than the MC. Then we have the mature or older man. They just, you know, they're very experienced. Those are all the character archetypes. Of course, there's more, but I feel like they're kind of like found in any other media, and I didn't really want to bring them up or bring them to the spotlight here because I would just be repeating knowledge that you already know. But yeah, there's a lot of different type of personalities for people who want to get into Otome games. Trust me, if you're looking for a certain type of guy, there's an Otome game out there with that type of guy. The Otome game genre has played a big role in popularizing the umbrella category of Joseimuke, which is under the bigger umbrella category joseimuke in the Western Hemisphere. Joseimuke means media aimed at women, basically a broader term that implies a certain target audience without involving romance in the game, story, or media that consumers are consuming. And yes, there is an equivalent umbrella category for men. It's called joseimuke. To be clear, there are subgenres as well in Otomemuke, such as Ume Muk, media targeting Yume Joshis. Now, Yume Joshis describe a specific type of woman otakus that dream about themselves being in a romantic situation with their favorite fictional characters. This is a heavily derivative work. Most Yume Joshis create original characters and insert themselves in their favorite media that way. The English equivalent of this term is a self-shipper. By the way, if you're going to search up Yume's on social media right now, be careful on who you choose to follow. Yume Joshis are also separated by another label, sharing and non-sharing. This is purely for online fan etiquette on social media for those who do not wish to see their favorite fictional character represented in media that doesn't include themselves. From my understanding, there are some bad apples of the non-sharing community where they go out and harass people. So if you see somebody doing that, please don't let that be the representation of non-sharing Yumes. They're mostly friendly and nice. They just want to have their own little bubble, and they have common sense and they understand they can't control what people post online. Back on track. Ume Muk is considered to be part of Otome Muke, with the main distinction that the depicted female character is usually not canonically in the series and is the Yume Joshi's rendition of themselves. A great example of this is Token Rambu, Obey Me, Love in Deep Space, or any other type of media where the heroine has long bangs and no eyes, or you can make a customizable character. They also cater to Yume Joshis by writing the main protagonist in canon with no distinct features or a strong specific personality, a blank slate. So, under the joseimuke umbrella, we got Otomemuke, BL Media, and then there's training games. Basically, it's the thing that has a lot of males, but strictly doesn't have any romance whatsoever. Example of this are Twisted Wonderland, Ensemble Stars, A3, and so on. This is because all three of those type of games all include a gacha card collecting aspect where you have to get the cards and then essentially train them. These types of games do not offer any romanceable options, and at best sometimes give fan service as a reward for maxing out a character's stats or just for a little tidbit or for an event. The protagonist sometimes isn't even a woman, but unspecified as well. This cultivates a fandom where people can self-insert, create OCs to ship with their favorite characters, or even ship characters with other characters in the game. To use more specific terms, these games intend to target Yume Joshis, Fujoshis, Otome fans, and the general otaku. Basically, the best target audience to encompass all niches and audiences without alienating anyone, thus making everyone happy and maximizing profits. It's probably why you see so many mobile gacha games utilizing elements that appeal to Yume Joshis and Fujoshis without committing to romance to also keep the third party around. Some lean more into the Otome element than the BL element, or vice versa, or none at all, but are aimed towards women. Think a spectrum. Anyways, the reason why I'm talking about joseimuke is that people often mix up the general umbrella term, joseimuke, and call it an otome without realizing that there is a very important distinction to make. I think this confusion stems from how broad most mobile and gacha games are nowadays, since they want to have as many fans interested. It sets up other people to expect romance in a game that doesn't even have it in the first place, leading to misunderstandings and frustrations. Also, there are not too many, but I've noticed some companies misadvertise games as otome games when in reality there is like little to no romance or like no official ending, just to get people to buy or check out the game and hope that they stay after liking it a lot. Today I really wanted to talk about something that I've been seeing pop up like very often for some reason. Like people are calling games that are not otome games just because they see catering to women, and not everything that caters to women has romance. I don't know, I feel like that's like a really old stereotype that misogynistic people have when it comes to women interests. So really quickly, let me make it clear what is and is not an otome game based on the already established labels in the Japanese language. This is a Japanese word that we are retaining from the Japanese language, and that in itself carries cultural value and helps people set their expectations when a game introduces itself to the market. But then again, this is the internet, and labels are just a label at the end of the day. No need to constrict yourself, and no one will really care as long as you don't mislabel or say something has something when it really doesn't. Also, I hope by giving you guys these labels, it will lead you down a rabbit hole of a favorite genre that caters to your specific interests. Starting from the protagonist that the player controls, if you are playing as a female and are romancing male interests, it is an otome game. If you are romancing female interests, it's a yurei game. If the majority of the love interests are a mix of both, there really isn't a label for this since there aren't many games like that out there, so for now, we can call it a romance game. Also, a minor note, we did have the instance of commercial otome games including one female love interest. That can still be considered an otome game. So at the end of the day, if there's a female protagonist and a male love interest, it is considered an otome game. You can also have an otome game with just one heroine and one love interest. That's like a single couple otome. There's otomes out there with multiple couples, and there's also an otome game with multiple heroines and multiple love interests. So one heroine can choose out of the 9, while the one with multiple couples, they are set and you cannot change who they are paired with. And then there are the typical reverse harem otomes where it's just one heroine and multiple love interests. If you are playing as a male protagonist and the love interests are male, you're playing a boys love, aka BL game. If it's a female love interest only, you are playing a gal game, also known as galage or bishoujo game. If they're both, again, it's a romance game. And lastly, if you're playing as a protagonist with an unspecified gender and you are romancing male interests, it's a romance game. Same with female interests, and same with both female and male interests. However, if you're playing a game where you can pick the protagonist to be a specific genre and you can also choose either female or male love interests, then you are playing a Danjoken Yorenai game, a romance game for both men and women. These games also allow both heterosexual and homosexual relationships, to clarify. At the end of the day, all of these different types of genres can be called romance games since they all have one end goal: romancing. Unfortunately, these genres aren't made equal since Euro games do struggle to sell compared to the other categories. This could also explain why the few Ultimate games who do feature one female interest route stop right after becoming best friends and never breaching into romance, due to the lack of market response to an untapped audience. Although, despite Euro games not being popular, Ultimate games are. Thanks to Love and Deep Space, Ultimate games are on the rise again. We haven't seen an interest in Ultimate games like this since Mystic Messenger, the dating sim with hot boys that called you up at 2 a.m. in the morning. Of course, with popularity, especially with anything that women are interested in, expect some misogynistic backlash. And besides the "oh my god, women are playing games, everybody freak out" type of commentary, we also get the type of commentary where I don't think these fans are ill-intentioned, but are technically barking up on the wrong tree, demanding different types of characters or routes in an Ultimate. I'm not saying that Ultimate games could have like one or two, sure, that's fine, but if you're looking for something else, you need to be looking in other places. That's all I really am saying. And it might not seem like an issue, but I've seen this conversation happen one to too many times on social media. And I think it's important to know that distinction between Otome games and joseimuke games because representation matters. And so hopefully this little chart will clear that up and lead you to the right place to find the right games. So if you are still here and you are still new, I'm going to go ahead and recommend some Ultimate games for beginners. So first on the recommendation list is Collar X Malice. I'm going to sound like a hypocrite, but I own Collar X Malice. It's in my backlog. I've had this game physically for 4 years and I have not cracked it open. I know I've committed a sin, but I've heard it is a really great first time Ultimate game for people who are really into anime and just want to get to know the basic features, voice acting, the seiyus, the archetypes, and I've heard it has a really good story. It's a lot of mystery, it's a lot of suspense, it's good. The second recommendation that I have is Code Realize. Code Realize I'm recommending for, I guess, similar reasons why I'm recommending Collar X Malice, but I would say that Code Realize is a teensy bit less darker than Collar X Malice. For me, Code Realize was really easy. It gave me an understanding of how Ultimate games are supposed to be like. It gave me the understanding of what a main route is like, and then what are the side routes and side stories. It gave me an understanding of what seiyus are and how they contribute to Ultimate games, and they gave me an understanding of just in general how to work the game and how much my choices affect the game. A third recommendation, if you don't own a Nintendo Switch and you don't want to go out of your way to get it, you can go for Amnesia. Amnesia is available on Nintendo Switch, but it's also available on Steam for PC, and I think that is more accessible to the Western hemisphere of the world because a lot of us own PCs or Nintendo Switches. If we don't have a Nintendo Switch, we definitely own a laptop or a PC, which is another big plus about Ultimate games. They don't really require a lot of power to run. So yeah, I recommend Amnesia. It covers basically all the different archetypes that you will encounter in an Ultimate game, and it's very I would say a very traditional in the sense of Ultimate games and experiencing good ends and bad ends and all that. I also recommend Amnesia just because the routes, not only the routes themselves are fun, but the bad ends are juicy. I'm not gonna spoil obviously, but it's thrilling. If you're into thrilling experiences and shocking and kind of drama and messy stuff, Amnesia is the game for you. My fourth recommendation, if you are looking for something that is free, and on the PC it would be Cinderella Phenomenon. It's been a hot minute since I played that game, but I do remember it being really easy and really friendly for beginner players because they don't really overwhelm you a lot. And I think it would be very an easy playthrough for beginners because there's not much to deter from. And it'll get you curious enough to figure out how an Ultimate game should be played. If you are one of the people who do not have a Nintendo Switch or a PC, and the only thing you got is your phone, the ultimate game I would recommend to play on your phone is the Ikemen series. The Ikemen series is a little bit different from how the other games are played. So for Amnesia, you pick the route right away, but for Color X Malice and Code Realize, you play the main story through, and then based on the choices that you make in the main story, you get your boy. But for Amnesia and Ikemen, vampires or villains, whatever, which one you pick, you choose the route that you want to pursue first. A lot of the mobile Ultimate games, they lock stories, so you can do a certain amount before you continue. I would also recommend Love in Deep Space because it's really popular right now, but I do know it's not very a traditional Ultimate game, just know that, because it has a lot of features that are kind of revolutionary, and that's why it's so popular. Like, there's not a lot of Ultimate games where you can literally control your character and fight and ult and use skills with your love interest. It just has so much content. So yeah, if you want to stick to mobile, I would recommend the Ikemen series for more traditional experience, Love in Deep Space, and of course Mystic Messenger if you want to have a main story and let the main story choose the love interest based on your options. If you are a Project Sekai fan and are into rhythm games, I would suggest getting into Jack Jeanne. Jack Jeanne is a great Ultimate game, especially if you love musical theater. It's about a girl who wants to go into theater, but the school that her brother went to is an all boys school, so due to some circumstances, she ends up going and having to pretend to be a boy, and if she gets found out, it's game over. She cannot continue her education, but if nobody finds out, she can keep going. And of course, this game is a little bit different because you could end up being with nobody and have, like, I guess, quote unquote, a friendship route. This game was made by Sui Ishida, who is the creator of Tokyo Ghoul. So if you have read his stuff, you know what you're gonna get into. The story is kind of like coming of age as well, and explores gender identity, theater, and passion, and just like the troubles of youth and trying to get into a creative field. And one more recommendation, sorry, I promise the list will stop here, but I would like to recommend, if you are confident that you're gonna love Otome games no matter what, I'm gonna recommend you, in my opinion, the best of the best Ultimate game, cream of the crop, Bust of Fellows. Bust of Fellows is cinematic. The seiyus are amazing, the expressions are amazing, the art is top notch. Everything about that game is a 10 out of 10. It is not mid whatsoever. All the characters, all the men are very interesting. The roots are very interesting. The story is very interesting. It is a mystery, it is a thriller, it is horror, it is comedy. It is basically a really good TV drama. So if you are into movies, dramas, K-dramas, suspenseful stories, mysteries, and you are confident that you like Otome games a lot, this game is a must play. Obviously, I would be really happy if you guys picked up one of the recommended games that I gave you. If anything that I talked about today wasn't really interesting to you, you don't have to go with what I say. When I say there is an Ultimate game out there for you, there is so many. Just do a quick Google search, check out the Ultimate Games Reddit. It has like of tons of people talking about so many different Otome games, and you don't have to stay with the, I guess, the commercial type of Otome game. There's a ton of indie Otome games like Cinderella Phenomenon. That is just one of the indie games out there. But if you want to check out other Otome games, or maybe have like something that's specific, like if you just want an Otome game with just old burly 40-year-old men, there's an Otome game out there, trust me. Or if you want an Otome game with monsters, you can date monsters, no one's stopping you. I'm sure somebody there has the same interests as you. So yeah, I hope you enjoy and go ahead and explore.